Hello. So let's we're dealing with now my family's leaving the shelter. And again, I'm leaving a historical document what it was like to grow up in the 1970s, 1980s. Particularly, we're moving into the projects. This is the exciting part. This is the part where I became an adult, where I became a man, where I became a type of person. You have to choose what you're going to be in the when you live in the projects in the 1980s. When you come up in poverty and you come up in mental poverty, it's spread. You have to choose. And so this is the part of my life where where I really say I became an adult. So we're moving in. I remember the first day, the buildings were huge and I couldn't believe it. And I was a smaller child, sensitive child, terrified. But when we got up to the apartment, everybody had their own room. My siblings, my sisters, for the first time. So we loved it. We had no furniture. The city did give my mom money to buy a table. They said you have to have money for these children. The children have to have a table to eat off of. They can't eat off of the floor. And my mom's like, well, what about beds and all? He's like, no. Back then, it's like, we don't care about that, but they have to have a table to eat off of. So that was civilized. So that was fine. So we did blankets and whatever. I remember my little sister and my nephews were on the same age. And we had blankets, and I would put them in the blankets because I was bigger. And I would pull them around the apartment. The apartment was huge. 5 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms. That's what we lived in. They've since knocked that building down. With all of the families that need, they've knocked that building down and built some little apartments. So they took away the units, the number of units. But that's what we lived in. And long hallway. And you can go around the kitchen and the living room around the hallway. And I would put them on the blanket and pull them around and pull them around and pull them around. And that's how we played. So when I was in the apartment, fine. But when I was outside the apartment and going to school was hell. I got jumped, beat up. You fought back when it was one person. And remember, I didn't like to fight. And it was natural for me not to like to fight. And this is the thing that a lot of black boys especially get, black girls now too. But it's early 1980s and everybody's telling me, my family's telling me, what few neighbors I have, you got to fight back. You got to fight back. You got to fight. You got to fight. You got to fight. So I would fight, but then they would jump me. 5, 6 guys jump me, take my little change, what little change I had. And sometimes I fight back. Sometimes I just didn't fight. I just didn't feel like fighting. But at 5, 6 guys, you just didn't do it. So this happened for like 2 years until I was really like fighting back. Then I remember they wanted me to join them and jump some other kids after that. And I just refused. I said no. So I'm 11, 12 years old maybe. Right? And listen, violence was everywhere. Our parents was encouraging violence. Our older siblings were encouraging violence. The police were violent. Everybody was encouraging violence. Everybody was encouraging violence. And if you were thoughtful or sensitive or wasn't violent, you were soft. So we all had to be violent. Now, all of that's out of me now. My heart is so hard now. It's ridiculous, but you think back to how many of us were made hard and how we think that's some kind of, yeah, man, I'm hard now. I had to be made hard. But it's not. Human beings are not necessarily supposed to be violent all the time. That's why we have brains. You can solve so many problems with your mind. Sometimes you do have to fight. Sometimes you have to defend yourself, but then that's just violence, looping in violence. But sometimes you do have to be aggressive and show some physical exertion. But we were just drenched in violence. Going to the store was violent. Walking to school was violent. Being in the school was violent. In my junior high school, we had kids that were in there that were 18 years old. Our basketball team was extraordinary because these kids were junior high school kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, but they were 15, 16, 17 years old, playing against other 13, 14-year-old kids in the district. So IS 55 was the school I went to. And so violence in the hallways, violence. As far as punching and never shooting or anything like that. They never shot at the school because they respected it in that sense, even when the crack came. We'll get into more of that kind of thing. But I just remember just a lot of violence, and you had to choose. You had to become violent. You had no choice in that. Or just continue to just get beat. And you just can't function like that. You have to get something done. You have to get things done. Then once you fight back, then you have to choose. Are you going to be violent on the next person down? And there's this twisted idea of, well, you're toughening them up. But really all we were doing was just beating each other down. That's all we were really doing. And again, I'm coming from a situation where I had seen my mother go to work and clean other people's houses. They didn't have to be violent. Their children didn't have to be violent when they were outside playing and all this other stuff like that. They didn't have to do that. But we had to do it. And we believed that it was part of our maturation. And it was a terrible thing. And then once I didn't choose that, I just said, listen, I'll defend myself, but I'm not going to torment anyone because I didn't like the way it felt for me. Already at 11 and 12, I was making decisions about, I didn't think about it that way, but it kind of did. I kind of was like, no, I don't want to do that because I didn't like the way it was done to me. So, but it wasn't a sophisticated analysis and decision, but when I think back on it, it was more mature than most people are even today. You know what I mean? People today we still carry that, yo, I gotta be violent, I gotta, you know. So, I remember going through that. I remember the neighborhood hating me. Now, what I did get in my teenage years was cover because my sister was dating the big drug dealer and she moved up the ranks to become his woman. And my sister was amazing, man. Very powerful. Very powerful. And so I got some cover with that. But I never really flaunted it because I never got into the drug thing. I just was kind of around it. And I was fascinated by it. But already I was developing a system of, there's just something about this drug thing that it's not, it feels like we're losing. Even the dealer that's making the money. And I'll tell you where I got that from, and maybe the next video I'll do the 5%ers on the corner. The 5%ers were very, very influential in my life. Because some of the stuff they were saying was like, man, but they were missing things. And I would ask them questions and they would chase me off the corner. So I'll do that in the next video and talk about the 5%ers on the corner. My experience with the 5%ers on the corner and my friends that were 5%ers. So I think that's what I wanted to say, that it was a lot of violence. We were living in it. We had to be violent. And then we were reproducing violence for the next generation down, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. And even today, if you talk to a black person, I'm 52, if you talk to another black person, 50 or 60, they'll tell you, man, you should punch somebody in the face, you should punch somebody in the bed. But then when it comes to doing some kind of social thing, like let's fight the education system, let's fight against the prison system, let's create something to keep our boys out of jail, that fight, nobody will take. There you can be a coward. As a matter of fact, you're encouraged to be nonviolent institutionally, but to be overly violent personally. And I think that's black people in a nutshell. Well, we can end this one there. If you want to support me, all the links are there. All of the platforms are there. You can donate directly. Until next time, be safe and take care. And try to be less violent.